Welcome, everyone. We're thrilled to have you all join us for the first of our resident talk series as part of the 2024-2025 season. My name is Allison Dennis. I serve as Executive Director for the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. And today's talk is going to be facilitated and moderated by my wonderful colleague, Nancy Newman. So I'm just going to greet us and just wanted to share a few quick updates before I hand things over to Nancy and our residents for tonight's program. Just a huge thank you to everyone in the Sitka community who was able to participate in one way or another in our 30th annual Sitka Art Invitational, which just completed this past weekend in Portland. We're still compiling all of the stories and results that we want to share out of the exhibit this year, but just wanted to share a few early outcomes with you all at the start of today's program. We had a 24% increase in audience attendance over last year. So great to see so many new folks finding their way to the Invitational at Oregon Contemporary in Portland. We also, this is our favorite number of all, 72% of the 100 artists we represented this year sold work at the show, and 61% of first-time artists who were showing work at the Invitational for the first time sold work, and 19 artists sold all of the work that they brought to the show. So just a huge thank you to the generous Sitka community for really not just in words, but in actions to supporting our incredibly rich and growing ecosystem of Pacific Northwest nature-inspired artists. If you get our newsletter, we'll share more updates about the show's results in the coming months as we celebrate all of our year-end successes. We just wanted to personally thank everyone who made a part of this show be just so successful for our artist community. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to tonight's moderator, Nancy Newman.
Thank you, Allison. Wonderful news on the Art Invitational, and I serve as the administrative coordinator for the Sitka Center. Sitka is located at Cascade Head on the north central Oregon coast and resides on the unceded traditional lands of the indigenous people, now represented by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of Celeste Indians. There is much to learn. As just one step we can take, especially when we're planning a visit to Sitka or to the coast in general, we encourage everyone to visit the Grand Ronde's Chichalu Museum and Cultural Center and its rotating exhibits. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the first of tonight's residents. Donna Henderson is the author of 4 collections of poems, 2 of which were finalists for the Oregon Book Award in Poetry. In 2007, Donna co-founded Oregon's Airlie Press, a shared work collective publishing poetry in close collaboration with artists and poets. Donna's poems, essays, reviews, song lyrics, and cross-genre collaborations have appeared widely in journals, recordings, and performance venues. Be sure to visit her website to read her long-running column, Are You With Me Here?, and subscribe to her Substack. Donna has been to Sitka previously as a workshop participant, and it has been our pleasure to be able to host her in residence. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Wonderful to be here. And a poem is not made out of ideas. A poem is made out of lines, poet Karen Brennan once declared, and that statement itself has been a kind of North Star for me over the years, reminding me that just as paintings are made out of paint, music out of sounds, and omelets out of eggs, poetry is made out of language, not out of concepts or ideas. In fact, the longer I write poems, and other things actually, the less interested I am in expressing feelings, opinions, or ideas as a kind of primary aim of writing. Instead, I find myself ever more deeply and even urgently impelled by a desire to engage in the act of, as poet Christian Wyman has put it, feeling through the sounds of words to the forms they make, and through the forms they make to the forms of life that are beyond them. So among the many strategies which exist to listen forms forward, and I love all that I've found, to listen forms forward from inside language itself, writing centos is one of my favorites for the way the process makes new forms by borrowing, recombining, and in the process paying tribute to language that has come before. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the cento. I have a lot to say on a blog post if you want to find out more about it. I did a 3-part post on this some time ago, which is accessible through my website. But I'll just say a little bit today because I really want to get to the centos, and I'm going to read 2 of my own. So for those not familiar with the form, a cento is a collage type poem composed from whole or half lines extracted from and often written in tribute to another poet's work. Those poets originally being Homer or Virgil in the classical Greek tradition of the cento. And while these days centos can be and are made by collecting and collaging together lines from anything, poems, newspaper articles, recipes. In fact, just yesterday, Nancy Kim sent me an Instagram post by the songwriter who wrote the singer Rihanna's first hit song entitled SOS, the entire second verse of which he composed by stringing together the song titles from other pop songs. And it works, at least as a pop song. So why not? And I'm most inclined, though, to start one in the process of reading a collection of poems or lyrical prose that I fall in love with, for the way that I found that the process itself invites me to more deeply engage with and savor and respond to a text that I really want to enter into. So while there's, again, a lot I could say about cento writing, including a long detour on the topic of originality that I cut this morning from my talk, I do want to get to read you a couple of centos without rushing. So I'm going to stop with the talk and get to the poems, but I'll say a little bit more in the course of reading them. So with both of the cento poems I'm about to read, I decided to follow the most strict of the various protocols for writing a cento because of the challenge it involves. I've written others where I don't, and there are lots of ways to play with centos, inserting your own lines or revising them, kind of using them as a scaffolding, and then going back through and revising a lot. But I did it the strict way, which means that none of the lines in either of these poems have been altered or added to in any way. I just lifted out lines as they spoke to me. And then once I'd collected all the lines, listened for the conversation they might want to have with each other. So the first and more playful of the 2 centos I chose because it is the title poem of the collection I'm working on at Sitka, and because it was also composed at a residency, that one at Playa on Summer Lake in Oregon's Great Basin. Also, I promised Nicole I'd read it. So the source text for this one, including the title, was solely the Cabin 9 guest resident journal at Playa, which entries covered a 10-year span. It's entitled Advice to Guest Residents. If a cat shows up, and she will, her name is Lefty, and there is kibble under the sink. Don't miss the sunrise. Open the curtain on the window side of the bed. If you don't want to kill a spider first thing every morning, flip kitchen sink drain baskets upside down. If you look outside the window and are unsure if it's earth, water, or sky, don't worry, this is normal. Enjoy the moment, my friend. You are about to embark on a soul search, whether you expect to or not. There are edible shaggy mane mushrooms out front. Try to ID them to be sure. Take the petroglyph hike if it's offered. Find the field of bones in the punch bowl. Enjoy the peace. Stay true and patient. Go to karaoke in Paisley's Pioneer Saloon. Do not go near the lights on the playa at 3 a.m. If someone pounds on your door after midnight asking for Mary, do not answer it. Pay attention, says the playa. The vertigo will pass. Some things will arise. One of the discoveries I've made in composing centos is that the state of receptivity the process involves often results in poems that feel like they read me back in surprising and often quite intimate ways. In fact, that feeling of being deeply seen by a cento was my experience in composing the other one I'm going to read, which I have been working on since I arrived a week ago, when I found in my cabin a gift from Sitka of You Are Here, Poetry in the Natural World, which is a stunning anthology of 50 poems by 50 contemporary poets, edited by the current US Poet Laureate. Because it's very much a collection of poems which speak from this particular moment in life of nature, I felt deeply met by it, and every poem really is a gem. And in fact, it includes a poem by poet and Sitka resident Donna Henderson. So this second cento, titled for the anthology, is composed entirely of lines from each of the 50 poems, one line from each poem, and again, with no idea along the way as to how they might ultimately connect with each other. I think this may be the poem's final iteration, but I'll be listening along with you as I read it for whether or not that feels true. It's very fresh. You are here, a cento. Come back to the world to which you belong, into field, 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 the ocean leaping out of ocean, the great bustling city of it all that still matters. Let me enter, please, let me. I'm not coping very well, but who is really? I'd be asleep if it were up to me. The moth babies flutter from sweater drawers. Risk lurks in every inch of soil as frost or scorch, and it's painful. Because I was terrified, I learned nothing. It was summer, the wind blew, the words shivered, split. I would like to believe in tenderness. It was the language we spoke to one another, what the sky said to me all those years ago: live, 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 live. I respect the patience of heartbreak and how it waits. Stillness is how to make peace with anything happening, and wind, blazing and billowing like the cloak the saint wore. What purpose otherwise is grief? What is the name for the scent that whispers mother? The grasses give off the damp straw smell of darkness coming on. In the forest, grief lives a new life. Sunlight, water, sunlight, water, sunlight, water. The great buttery platters of fungus and seeds swarming to life where it seems as if nothing should grow. Such effulgence, it's like showing a 3D movie. The marsh revels in its glitter and sings the rains of Maui awake. What is under this water, and what was once water? These mountains have given us porches, tomatoes in the summer, bed linens sailing the wind, curtains flaring. Forget the stars wasting themselves across the sky. The moon won't speak, yet I believe if one listens, one might hear the night is swallowing the rain, of course, as it dings, a wet cracking and popping. I think how much is possible, a garland of souls, whole antlered herds under the skies, chewing despite the shrinking footprint of the pond, the ground, and the rest of the savannah. Let's go be alive like that, like rattlesnakes which smell like wet rope, melons, the magpies, the ferrymen, God, the poets, everything, at the word, at having woken. Come back to the world to which you belong, your mouth around light, and me with you in all this soft, wild buzzing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna, for sharing with us tonight and for taking us inside the world of cento poems. Our second presenters tonight are the artist duo known as Skuja Braden. This international artist collaboration is known by the combined surnames of Ingūna Skuja of Latvia and Melissa Braden of California. Collaborating since 1999, their work is a fusion of decorative styles, touching on literary and art historical themes, grounded in the politics of now and interpreted through the experience of their shared existence. Skuja Braden represented Latvia in the 59th Venice Biennale, and they have held over 50 solo exhibitions, including shows in New York City, Milan, Istanbul, and Zagreb. Ingūna and Melissa usually reside in Latvia, but most recently were here at Sitka's campus, participating in the Jordan Schnitzer printmaking residency with printer Julia DeMario. This is the second time Sitka has hosted Skuja Braden in residence. Welcome back to Sitka, Ingūna and Melissa.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
It was really amazing experience the second time around, as well as the first time around. It was really wonderful. I think it's gotten us thinking about how to approach our work in different ways.
This printmaking experience, we're gonna continue in our clay and painting. And today we went to Georgie's to the shop and we were looking for tools, how to maybe linoleum and copper and new paints, new glazes, because the Sitka colors in nature are very inspiring. There are so much textures and the mushrooms are tasty. We picked the big mushrooms and we eat them. The beach was amazing. And when we dried the beach, it was like making prints.
Yeah, that was strange. We kind of thought we were making prints on the beach. Just to be in nature, and this sort of nature is unusual. And what was amazing was that we've never worked in prints before, and it was a way for us to go on a sort of an exploration into a whole new medium. We were learning from her as we were going along, and we weren't able to get back to America for about 15 years because Ingūna had a 10-year ban. We were really surprised by how much things have changed in Portland and Oregon, because the last residency we had at the Sitka was 17 years ago. Kind of amazing to have this, to come back again to where you've left. And then, you have this sense of like time and space. Our lives have changed tremendously in 17 years. We're now legally married, and we live full-time in Latvia, which we didn't anticipate ever wanting to do, but that's what's happened. And so we thank Sitka and Jordan Schnitzer and Julia DeMario for helping to make this a possibility for us. And I think that the work that we did at Sitka is going to inspire us into the future. I actually can't stop thinking about how to translate the prints into porcelain works and how we're going to incorporate them into a full-on show. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, it was amazing to visit the trees, how they grow much bigger in 17 years.
You could tell the difference?
Yes, they were so big. I forgot how big they are.
But just being able to come back and revisit old friends and to have this new experience was really, truly magical and wonderful.
The best residence
Yeah.
on the earth.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ingūna and Melissa, for taking us inside your collaborative practice and inside your residency experience. It's really special to hear your perspective. Our next presenter this evening is Nancy Y. Kim. Kim is an interdisciplinary artist based in Bologna, Italy. She draws from her experiences of otherness and foreignness while exploring ideas like dislocation and diasporic identity. Nancy's practice combines the processes and materials of painting, sculpture, and installation. Her work reveals internal universes through the excavation and amalgamation of nature, traditions, and her experience as a Korean American living in Italy. Sitka community, please join me in welcoming Nancy to the Sitka Center.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. I have a little presentation prepared, so I'm going to go ahead and share. I'm Nancy Y. Kim, And I am an Italy-based Korean American artist, but you can also kind of think of me as a second generation Korean American immigrant living as a first generation immigrant in Italy. I also grew up in the Midwest outside of a Korean American community. So this feeling of being a little bit out of sync, a little bit undefinable, is something I was born into. I think of myself as someone who was born into foreignness, as someone with an understanding of broken narrative and nonlinearity. And so I speak and see through material. So for me, material like stone, bone, salt, and water are nodes or points of intersection where meaning can be layered and created through constellation among forms. So for example, here in this image, are some pieces that I made during my time at Bow Institute in Cassis, France, about a year ago. You can see like that the bases of these pieces are of limestone and dolomite, which is really kind of particular in their form for the area. However, this as a material you can find in the mountains of Korea and Italy, as well as the Michigan Basin, and here in Oregon as well. So I think about these materials and think about how they call out to different parts of the world that make up my composition across space and time and through my ancestry. And I like in its multiplication that they can hold oneness and disparateness at the same time. So I also appreciate material and spaces that allow for the fluidity of meaning. During my time in Cassis, I became so focused on the water and the water line. This kind of feeling of being in two places at once, in two states of being, wondering, am I at both at once or just kind of flipping back and forth? So I started photographing it and being of it without really knowing where I was going with it. I also started collecting from these spaces, including the water, which led to an investigation in salt. So these are stones collected from the 5 beaches of Cassis within walking distance from me. I collected water from each of the beaches to extract the salt and encrust each stone with the salt from their home beach. What I like about this piece is each set of stones kind of calls back to their home. When I think about salt, among other things, I think about preservation for travel, journey, and voyage. But I also think about how, in conversation with visual artist Halsey Rodman, he said something along the lines of like, oh, you know, like we add salt to things to make them taste more like themselves. And I really like this idea that we work to preserve something essential about ourselves as we head outward, maybe so as not to lose ourselves. So I like how the salt accumulates as if it's working to kind of reach back and connect outward at the same time. I think of these sets of stones as kind of love letters to their homes. There's also something about them that really talks about erratics. I'm not sure if you're familiar with erratics, but okay, so erratics are rocks that kind of have been deposited into an environment that is foreign to themselves by glaciers. So they may have been in a location for ages, but they're compositionally different than the rocks around them. And so I kind of think of myself as an erratic making other erratics. So almost immediately after my time at Bow was over, I was invited to Chow North residency in Pine Plains, New York. And I found myself again in the water, but this time filming the sun through that water line. This piece, called The Sun is Also a Star, it was filmed at Stissing Pond and is on loop. It should be, you have to kind of imagine it projected on the ceiling. So as a viewer, your viewpoint is recessed below that water line. And so with the video on loop, it kind of creates a circular rhythm where time wraps around you and kind of creates a bubble below the surface that exists inside and outside of time. I like this simultaneity of being inside and outside, which is something I think about a lot. I relate this to that kind of experience of the simultaneity of seeing and being seen. I don't know if you can like catch that rhythm. So here we are a year later in 2024 at UCross residency in Wyoming. So this is just a month ago. I was there just before I arrived here in Sitka. So same sun, different location, different time. I think of it almost as we are in another lens, another bubble. And sometimes I think about how where we are can change who we are. And maybe the same for the sun too. So while I'm out in these spaces, I start collecting images, sounds, objects, and I start to compose them. I start by playing with balance and stacking. And this stacking and balancing comes out of a memory of seeing Korean stone towers called dota when I was a kid. So I would seeing so many of them rising out of like the mountainside path, that really stuck with me as a child when we went to Korea. I was told that they were like wishes and good luck and protection. So here I kind of create my own dota, but in diaspora, working with what I find. And I also kind of think of these as they are those things of wishes and protection. But also for me, there are these kind of communication towers that transmit to distant elsewheres. And sometimes these forms remain as they are, only defined by kind of the intervention of the human touch, and how they're put together suggests a past presence, a ghost of an other. Other times they get reconfigured. So for example, that rock on the left has been broken and mended with acrylic paint and molding paste. So I think that I'm always kind of reaching out for understanding and slipping over and over again. But in that slippage, in that distance, I find kind of the space for creation. I keep trying to create in order to bridge that gap in translation in imperfect understanding. I sometimes think that there's something unnameable in that I'm reaching for. And in the visual, I can start to talk about it. So I kind of think almost as if each work is a point around the edge of that unnameable thing, kind of looking at the void from different perspectives. And with enough points, you start to see the shape of it, that shape of the unnameable. In my work, you might see a lot of kind of doubling that occurs. So within this piece, you see that natural form, but also this resin form. So it's a self and a ghost of self. And I'm thinking it right now as this materializing of an internal universe. Something I also do quite often is I will take that ghost form and I will take that stone and I will make it, it will hold its own ghost and it carries with it wherever it goes. Something that I was experimenting with is creating hollowness within these kind of resin forms. And in these places where I let the resin become quite thin, you can kind of have these windows into those kind of inner caverns inside. So here's another version of that. And sometimes I think like if these were cartoons, like these would be like their thought bubbles. And again, kind of like maybe this has a better view of that kind of lacy like view where you can kind of see into its interior world. So here I am. So here we are now at Sitka. And I've been here about a week and a half. And I would say that I notice here that the definition of edges is kind of softened and dissolved by the mist and water. And I'm thinking now about how to bring some of that softness and that kind of dissolving into my work. I kind of think that these kind of in-between spaces that's caused by this blurring of that edge between like sky and water, that there's something I'm really in tune with, that we kind of vibrate at the same frequency. And so I see them and I'm able to kind of pull from them and make pieces from them. But that's also with the help of a little gear because it is rainy and cold. And so I find myself in the water and out there and trying to really become part of it and to really see it. And then again, continuing with that kind of filming of the sun from below, it's so interesting like how different it can be in different places. This is from the estuary, about 15 minutes walk from here. Same sun, different location, a different lens. And then I noticed also that here at Sitka, nature is really chatty. Like it really wants to talk with you. And surrounding you with talk about life, so much life going on, but also death as well. And then also that kind of primordial oozy in-between space that is so mysterious. And so I'm just kind of trying to figure out how to bring it all home. So, like I'll find something and I figure out how to bring it home. So this stump, I picked it up over here at the end of this pink dotted line, carried it across around the bank, and then swam with it across the estuary. And then with a little help from some friends, Donna, thank you so much for helping me to then carry it the rest of the way home. And so now here we are in studio, and I'm still waiting to see where it all leads. I just want to thank you for taking the time to walk with me through my work. And I want to just also take a quick moment. I'm also like thanking Donna again for like helping me with that last leg. You know, like these kind of residency spaces, it's so important. It's so amazing, like to have also this opportunity to meet different kinds of people and to find your people. So for example, when it was my last night at UCross, and I'm trying to gather all my things, and you know, mixed media artist Tyler Stoll photographed this work for me. Painter Lynn Myers assisted with the lighting. Composer Therese Workman cataloged these pieces, and with poet Diana Delgado, they helped me pack these things for shipping. We did all this the night before so that I could get some sleep, you know, a little bit of sleep that night and not be alone. I just kind of love like how in residency spaces, they're not just opportunities for work, but also for a way to find your people and hold space for each other. And I think about how our work here are pieces that we put out into the world, but they can also kind of become lighthouses and messages in a bottle, where sometimes those messages are received and returned to us. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for sharing with us this evening. Our last presenter tonight is Celeste Pepitone-Nahas. Celeste is a writer, musician, and educator. Her nonfiction has appeared in Czech Music Quarterly, Glissando Magazine, Transitions Magazine, and the Czech New Music Magazine, Časopis o jiné hudbě. Her poetry can also be found in Annulet, a journal of poetics. She earned her MFA in 2021 from Washington University in St. Louis, where she was awarded the MFA Alumni Prize for Best Novel in Progress. In 2024, she was longlisted for the Disquiet International Literary Prize in Nonfiction. Everyone, please join me in giving a warm Sitka community welcome to Celeste.
Hi, thank you so much, Nancy. It's been wonderful to be here this past week, and just to have a really big writing desk is something that's invaluable. And then being on the Oregon coast, I grew up in Portland, so this place, this atmosphere is special to me, but having the time here in the context of a residency is life-changing, and I feel it's been so generative for me. And it's wonderful to meet the other artists who are here with me. So I'm going to share my screen, if you'll give me one moment. So I have exciting news, which is that my first novel, I just received the first offer for my first novel, which I'm very excited about. But today I'm not going to read from that work. I'm going to talk more generally about some of the ideas and concepts I'm working with. So my work focuses on music, memory, and time. I'm influenced by music because I am a classical pianist, so that's my training and background. But in my writing, I have drawn a lot from that background. So you can see these images here are three sources I really draw from. Prokofiev's piece, Visions Fugitives. It's a set of 20 pieces for solo piano. And what's remarkable about these works is that some of them are 20 seconds long, but he titles each with an Italian musical term to denote style. So from agitato to dolente, you have this absolutely incredible range of emotions. And that's something to be found in all of his work, and something that I really used in my novel. I won't say too much about it, but my novel is about a group of musicians. In the center here, you have a painting by Kandinsky. And this might surprise you because we think of Kandinsky as a painter with really bright lines, shapes, circles, abstract art. But this was painted in 1903 at the turn of the century. Kandinsky was born in 1866. He was the son of a tea merchant. And what I love about this work is two things. First, it reminds me to experiment. He worked not only in abstract painting, but in woodcuts with sketching, lino cuts. And here you can see this is really an impressionistic work. And it also reminds me of story. This painting is called The Blue Rider. And I find it so compelling that there's even a blue shadow beneath this horse. And finally, I have a book here, an experimental memoir by the American writer Joe Brainerd. This book is comprised of fragments, each of which begin with the phrase, "I remember." And when you read it as a totality, it's almost like pointillism. You not only get a sense of his unique childhood, but you understand the atmosphere of 1950s America. So these are three sources that I really draw from in my work. History and personal history memoir is very important to me. These are photos of my family from Austria and the Czech Republic. And I currently live in Prague, and it's wonderful to be in a place where I can feel connected to and be with family and be learning more about my family. My grandfather, in fact, had a small bust of Beethoven on his piano, which was one of the reasons I wanted to play as a child. And this other photo of the stone lion is from the St. Louis Art Museum. And what I love about these two images together, of course, I hope you can see the similarity in this very flamboyant hair. And it just reminds me that while I revere artists that have come before, and I think there's so much to learn, I'm also not afraid to kind of knock them off their pedestals and to poke fun at this weight and seriousness that we give the past. So I'm both look up to the past and also want to play with it. Right before I came to Sitka, I found this wonderful book by an author I love, Ali Smith. And she's actually quoting here from another writer, Jose Saramago. And Saramago is complaining. He's saying writing is so difficult. And the reason he gives is that however hard writers might try, there is one feat they can never achieve. That is to put into writing in the same tense two events which have occurred simultaneously. And I love this quote because I disagree with it. In my work, I'm actually trying often to layer time and to have events occur at the same time. But what interests me is Saramago goes on to say that the artists who can achieve this are opera singers, because you can have 3, 4, 5 singers in unison telling their side of the story. He says, for example, the cynic mocking, the ingenue pleading, the gallant lover slow in coming to her aid. And in my book and in all my writing, I often have multiple voices that are in unison together and each telling their side of the story. And it's possibly not a surprise that I love opera and have learned a lot from it. Living in Prague, opera is a big part of the culture. It's more affordable. You can, for 15 euros, you can see an opera pretty much any night of the week, which is not possible in places like New York City. And this opera on screen here, I've actually only seen on YouTube, but it's a fantastic work by Philip Glass. It's called Akhenaten. And it's based on an Egyptian pharaoh, a real pharaoh from about 1300 BC. And he invented a new religion. And this opera is very mystical. It has a lot of repetition in the music, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. And the reason I had to study this opera and I fell in love with it is actually because my character loves this opera. So I found that my character started becoming obsessed with this opera, and so I also had to as well. So here's my writing desk from Sitka, and I have Akhenaten on the screen, and I'm doing some writing. A lot of my work is collage-based. These are some old notebooks, but as a pianist, I'm always working with my hands. Things need to be very tactile for me. So all my first drafts are going to be by hand. I also use some painting and image in my notebooks. And finally, to bring up romanticism, I love 20th century music, but here at Sitka, I've been reading the diaries of some very famous 19th century musicians. So Chopin and Schumann, they were born in the same year. They were incredibly different. Chopin was a bit more formal, maybe stuffy, you could say. He believed that music should be a thing in itself. And if he knew that today we've named some of his etudes, we've given them nicknames, such as the Revolutionary Etude, I think he would be appalled because he didn't want people to be imposing story on what he thought should be pure music. Now, Schumann had a very different viewpoint. Schumann loved story. He was a writer, he was a journalist, he created a music magazine, and he was circulating it and trying to get other romantic composers to contribute and to do arts criticism. And he loved characters. So in his notebooks, he had a whole cast of characters that fed into his music. The most famous are Florestan and Eusebius, these two conflicting personalities that were really real to him. And this is really a romantic ideal that I resonate with. Here is an image from another opera, Dvorak's Rusalka, which is based on Slavic mythology. And a Rusalka is a kind of spirit. It has to do with fertility rites. And I bring this up because my work, I'm also looking backwards. I'm looking at myth and at history. These are notebooks from notes I took about the year 1916. And this image here is an X-ray of the Empress Tatiana's hand. She was the wife of Nicholas II, the last Tsar in Russia. So after 300 years of Romanov rule, when the Russian Revolution happened, the Romanov family was actually murdered and the Bolsheviks took over. And I love this image because it's her hand with her jewelry and kind of grasping for that last year of power. So I talked at the beginning about overlapping time. And one reason I do that is because I question a lot how much things change. This photograph is from 1917, but it's actually a women's march, and women are marching because of the price of bread at a time of huge income inequality. So I think today, when we're just facing so much in the political world, in our everyday lives, I'm thinking a lot about equity, about who gets to be an artist, who's free to do the work that they want, rather than work that's been dictated by a patron or someone who's supporting them. And these are questions I'm constantly asking myself. And speaking of work, I like Schumann, I do some music writing. So you can find my work online. I write about opera, and I also write about new music, which just simply means music being composed by living composers working in the here and now, some of whom are doing just incredibly innovative things. So if you are a musician listening to this talk, or you want to collaborate with me, don't hesitate to get in touch. And I just want to thank Sitka one more time for this opportunity.
Thank you, Celeste, for taking us inside your process. Thank you, Donna, Ingūna, Melissa, and Nancy for sharing with us this evening. Thank you, Sitka community, for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Good night, everyone.